guys, welcome to the Knitting Expat Podcast. This is episode 115. Welcome. My name is Mina and I'll be your host today. Hi, it has been so long. It has been it must be like a month and a half now since I last recorded, at least last recorded a proper sit down podcast. There has been a lot of action on the Knitting Expat channel on YouTube. There was Vlogmas going on, and I vlogged into the first week of January actually every day, so there's like 38 vlogs from the last month and a half. So yeah, so I've been online a lot recently, but I haven't actually done a proper sit down video for you guys for quite a while. So here we go. I have a lot to cover today, or this evening, and yeah, so I'm going to start out by saying my name is Mina. Hi, if you're new, thank you so much for checking me out. I hope you enjoy what you see. This is a podcast where I mainly chat about the stuff that I knit, and I'm also a knitwear designer, so there's a lot of chatter about design projects and stuff like that, as and when there are things that I could talk about, and yeah, there'll be other bits of goodness thrown in there for you guys as well. I have a lot to cover today. Like I said, it must be about 6 weeks since I last recorded, so I have a bunch of finished objects to go over, a bunch of works in progress, and prizes to discuss and show you guys, prize packages, a very small number of acquisition thingies, and yeah, and a bunch of questions I have to answer. I feel quite bad because there are loads of questions in the thread on the Ravelry group that I hadn't gotten around to responding to, and I meant to do that during Vlogmas and it just never happened. So I'm so sorry for being so late about it, but I will answer all those questions today. And yeah, I'm coming to you today from my home in New York City, where I live with my husband, our almost 11-month-old baby, which is insane, and our 2 cats. So welcome. My husband is actually out this evening, which is why I'm recording this evening, and yeah, it's like a work dinner thing. So so yeah, and Layla's asleep, our baby girl is asleep, and I'm taking this opportunity to record. If you haven't watched for a while, or you've not been following, or you're new, we are living in New York at the moment, but we are going to be going back to the UK, hopefully temporarily, but initially anyway, we're going to be back for a few months, because for visa reasons. I'm not going to go into like too much detail. I think it was like day 3 on Vlogmas that I talked about it, so you can go back and check that if you are interested in hearing the story in a little bit more detail. It's not really relevant too much to you guys necessarily, other than the fact that I'm not going to be in New York and I'll be in London for a while, which is where I'm from originally. So once we get back to London, it's going to be interesting to see how the whole podcasting thing's going to fit in around life there and things like that. I mean, I'm still going to be podcasting, but so what time of day and stuff. I do work on alternating between a regular sit-down podcast and vlog weeks. So again, if you're new, you're not aware of this, I will do a sit-down podcast this week, and then over the next week I'll record every day little bits like vlogging style and put together a vlog episode or video for the following week, and that way it kind of breaks it up and makes it easier for me to fit in podcasting with my life. And I don't always get a whole ton of knitting done every week now that I've got a baby to look after, as well as everything else that we do. So so yeah, anyway, I guess that was a bit of an introduction of sorts. So yes, we'll move on now. So like I said earlier, I have a few other announcements, like design related announcements. Then we're going to go on to finished objects, works in progress. I also have a little bit of a review in the finished objects section. I was sent something to knit up and review, and I'm going to do that now. I will do that then. Works in progress, some acquisition stuff to talk about, knit alongs and giveaway news, and that's when I'll be showing prizes that are coming up, questions and answers, and a bit of a weeks in review, I guess, at the end. Alright, so in terms of other announcements, I do have a few patterns that have been released since the last time I talked to you guys. First of all, the New York Sock Club, which started last year in March, I believe, was when the first pattern was released. The New York Sock Club patterns are now available for individual purchase as of the 1st of January. They were, oh no, sorry, 1st of December. You guys already know this. So that's been out, just a reminder. And secondly, I also designed a set of patterns for O-Loops for their for the O-Loops Harry Potter knit along that runs, I think it's like October, November, December. And once that knit along was over, I was allowed to publish the patterns for individual purchase. So those 3 patterns are also now available for purchase, and those are the Amortentia hat, which is a really lovely cabled hat. And I actually knit this hat using fingering weight held double. You can also use worsted weight or like DK to get a similar effect. So it's a nice squishy warm hat, perfect for the winter, covered in really lovely sort of like cross cables, so they're little kisses. So Amortentia is the love potion in Harry Potter. And yeah, it's got my folded brim as well, which I absolutely love doing on my hats. Really warm and squishy. Then we have the Hogwarts Express cowl. So it's a lovely fingering weight cowl, and I think I'm holding it the right way up. Yeah. So it's supposed to, the stitch pattern, the lace pattern represents the plumes of smoke coming off the Hogwarts Express. So that was the inspiration behind that one. And finally we have the Herbology socks, which from the colour and the stitch pattern were influenced and inspired by the herbology class that the students take at Hogwarts. So those are the 3 Harry Potter patterns that are also now available for purchase if you are interested in those. I know quite a few people were waiting for these to be released, so I did announce it on Instagram, and just in case you missed it there, I'm telling you guys now. And the last thing to tell you guys about is the 2018 Sock Club has officially launched. Again, I've obviously talked about this on Instagram and on the vlogs and stuff, but again, I hadn't had a chance to show you the pattern on the podcast. So the first pattern for the 2018 Sock Club, so the first pattern that was released was part of the Wanderlust Sock Club, and this is the Resverber socks. I'm not actually sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's the restless race of the traveller's heart before the journey begins, and I thought that was a very good phrase or word meaning to kick off the year with, you know, all the anticipation of things to come. And yeah, it's a really simple rib-based pattern. Great for, you know, if you're new to pattern socks and you've only done vanilla socks in the past, or you haven't done much sock knitting. It's nothing overly complicated, it's just knits and purls, and it just gives a really fun texture. It works really well with a lot of different yarns. The yarn I use for this one is by Fully Spun, and it's the Blue Hole colorway, and it's on their sock base. I think this one was an 85-15 merino nylon blend. And yeah, I really like how these have turned out, and it was a gradient, sort of, not quite a gradient, but it was like a gradiating changes in color, kind of like how a Crazy Zalba ball knits up with like really long color changes. So yeah, I really like how this one turned out, and yeah, so I'm really excited. It's never too late to join. You can always join the club at any point throughout the year. Like I said, there's the Wanderlust Sock Club, which is more beginner friendly sock club, and there's also the Cozy Sock Club, which is more like intermediate, aimed at basically people who've done a bit more than just a plain vanilla sock in the past. And I mean, if that's all you've done and you want to do that, then you want to do that club as well. That's not a problem. It is not beyond beyond reach for a beginner either, but I call it an intermediate club because the patterns in those in that club won't necessarily be as mindless or necessarily as easy to memorize, or necessarily as you know, you might need to pay a bit more attention to them. You might need to look at the pattern more frequently. You might need to have, you know, they'll have some special stitches involved that you possibly haven't come across before, even as a more advanced sock knitter. So it's something to just basically give you a bit more of a challenge whilst still keeping it fun and entertaining. And you know, none of my sock patterns are super difficult. I don't think any of them are beyond a beginner's capabilities, in my opinion. That's obviously my opinion, but yeah, and any special stitches in either of the clubs that is anything more than what you would use in a standard vanilla sock, or like a yarn over knit two together kind of instruction, anything more complicated than that, I will have tutorial videos in the patterns for you guys as well. So this one obviously is just knits and purls, so there's no tutorial for this one. But actually for the beginner sock club, I think there's only 2 of the patterns are gonna have tutorials for them. And then for the more advanced one, I think there are I think it's 4 or 5 out of the 6 are going to have tutorials for them. Not that you necessarily need the tutorials, it's just I know sometimes people find it difficult to visualize based on written instructions how to do something, especially if it's not a standard sort of stitch combination. Then it's easier to have a visual representation of how that stitch is worked to be able to follow along. So it's not a sign that the pattern is necessarily difficult, it's just a sign that there's additional help for those who want it. Okay, that was a lot more chatter about that than I had anticipated, but yeah. And now I've just realised I forgot to mention all the places that you can find me, because I am terrible at remembering to do that. You can find me online as Knitting Expat on Instagram, Mina Phillip on Ravelry. You can find the podcast group on Ravelry as the Knitting Expat Podcast. You can find my knitting patterns for sale on Ravelry as Knitting Expat Designs. And you can find show notes for this and all previous episodes at knittingexpat.wordpress.com. So moving on to finished objects, I have a little stack of things to show you. Oh, before we jump into that, one last thing. I am wearing my first garment design project, design-ish thing. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is the mix and match cardigan, which I designed. I originally designed the mix and match sweater, which is a pullover for children. And then I decided to make an adult version, and I decided instead of having a pullover, I'll do it as a cardigan, and instead of having a round neck, I'll do a V-neck, because that's what I really enjoy with cardigans. I like a nice shawl collar, and it's not too, the shawl collar isn't like too overwhelming, it is just nice. Or you also have the option to not have a shawl collar and just have a flat collar. You have the option of doing this texture pattern or having it plain stockinette. There's an option on the hem to have like a high-low hem or just have a straight hem. There's loads of different options in this pattern for what you can do, and you can also knit it in either DK or worsted. You just have to get gauge, and yeah, so it's a really fun mix and match pattern. You can do it how you like, and I love providing you guys with as many options as possible with my designs to make them as customizable for you and what you prefer. So this is the cardigan, and this is the matching hat that I've also designed. The children's version of the hat is already published, along with the children's version of the sweater. But the hat and the sweater will hopefully, fingers crossed, be released towards the end of this month, early February. I've given my test knitters until the end of this month to finish. Some have already finished and some are still working on it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, like I said, all goes well, and this pattern should be released in the early days of February. That is the aim. My hat is slightly worse for wear because I found Layla playing with it, my daughter, playing with it the other day, and all was fine. She was just sitting there, passing it from hand to hand, laughing at it, and then suddenly she's like ripping strands out of the pom-pom. So the pom-pom's a little bit disheveled, it needs a bit of attention and a bit of a trim. There's a couple of long bits sticking out now from where she's been tugging on it, but I'll just put it on. The hat also has the high-low feature if you want it to, which means it just sits a bit lower in the back than at the front. So, not sure how well you're going to see it here, but it does sit a little bit lower in the back than at the front. It means your ears stay covered, which is nice. And the yarn that I use for the hat and this cardigan is by Into the World. It's on their Dresden DK base, which is 100% superwash merino, in the mildly amusing colorway, which I found hilarious. It's this beautiful sort of really dark purples and greens mottled together. It's a kettle dye, this one, and it's beautiful because it doesn't pull. I love how this one knits up. Anyway, now we can move on to finished objects. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys is another upcoming design that I still need to finalize the pattern for, to be able to, and send it to be tech edited before it can go out to test knitters. It's this little beauty. This is the I haven't actually named it yet, but it is a children's cabled cardigan with a shawl collar, as you can see. This was knit out of Primrose Yarn Company on her Jasper DK base, the label, on the Jasper DK base in the Nasty Unicorn colorway, which I really liked. It's quite a, I'd say it's quite a feminine color without being overly pink, if that makes sense. I kind of I like this sort of mix of colors. I think it works really nicely, like I said, without being overly feminine. And this isn't necessarily a feminine design, you know, you can make it what you want. I definitely feel like it's a unisex pattern. So you've got these fun little cables running down the front here, and then there's a lovely big chunky one running down the back. So it's great. It's a very sort of simple, almost stockinette, well, it's a stockinette based cardigan with some fun little cable details at the front and in the middle of the back. And yeah, it knit up really quickly. It was really fun. The shawl collar detail is also a really fun feature on a kid's cardigan, I think. And yeah, I think I knit this in the 1 to 2 year size. I can't remember now, I need to check my notes. I'm pretty sure I knit this in the 1 to 2 year size, but it is pretty big on my baby right now, so that's fine. Like, I wasn't intending on her wearing it this winter. It's more for next winter. She has plenty of knitwear for this winter, so I didn't want to over-cater for that. But yeah, so this is far too big on her now, which, like I said, is fine. It's really intended to fit her next year, so, or end of this year, I guess. Can you believe it's 2018 already? Like, it's insane. Madness. Anyway, so that's that. And I actually showed this on Vlogmas as well. I'm showing only a few of the things that I also showed on Vlogmas, just so otherwise we'd be here forever. The other thing I wanted to talk about was this pattern, because I've got a lot of questions about it and stuff. I also showed this on Vlogmas. These are the convertible mittens that I knit for Perry for Christmas. And this is also out of the same yarn that my cardigan and hat are made out of. I had some leftover additional yarn, so I knit up a pair of mittens out of Into the World. Dresden DK, mildly amusing colourway. And this is the Woluxu mittens. The Woluxu pattern by Brittany Albertston, and which is, so it's available on Ravelry. I believe it's a paid for pattern. I think it's only $3 or something, so it's really good value. And it comes in like kids to adult large sizes. And I knit the adult large, and it fits me. I've got quite large hands for a woman. My hands are basically the same size as Perry's, and they fit me perfectly. So just thought I'd show you that. So I knit the pattern pretty much as written. There's only one thing that I did differently, was when you picked up for the convertible portion of the mitten, I think the pattern has you do rib all the way round, and I only did rib on the flat part. The back part I just knit in stockinette. That was just my personal preference, and I knew Perry wouldn't want it that way. Like, he wouldn't have wanted that. So that's the only modification I made. Otherwise I knit everything exactly to pattern in terms of like row counts and everything. Oh, and that was the other thing, I knit the cuff a little bit shorter than the pattern called for, because again, I asked Perry and he didn't want it to be that long. So that's that. Those are the only two modifications I made. And the only other thing that I've done since is, rather badly, I need to fix this actually, because it doesn't work at the moment, is I picked up some of this stuff. It's the Sensor thread by Boy. So it's basically meant to be conductive thread that you can sew onto like the fingertips of your gloves to make them work with electronics, like touchscreens and stuff. Now, I've got the iPhone 10, which doesn't actually have a home button, and Perry got one recently as well. Mine was a Christmas present from Perry, which I was not expecting. It was like completely out of the blue. But he got his on a contract sort of thing. But now that he's got that, he's like, well, having a thumb on here is really annoying, because it means he has to use he can use the convertible part, but then it means he has to use both hands to work the phone. Whereas if he could use his thumb, then he could do it use the phone one-handed. That's what I'm trying to say. He could use the phone one-handed. But so I tried 3 times now to sew this thread stuff on, and it kind of works, but because it's on the, like, right on the pad of the thumb, it's actually very awkward to use. Whereas when you're using the phone, or we find when we're using our phone, tend to use the edge of your thumb or finger more than the actual like pad of the thumb. So I have a bit more of the thread left. I've used a lot of it already. So I'm gonna try it on the other hand and do it on the edge and see if that gives a better result. Worst case, if none of that works, I'll just rip out the top of the thumbs and do a bit of ribbing and leave the thumb open so he can get his thumb out easily to use his phone. So yeah, basically that's where we're at with these right now. I need to fix that. The other problem as well is this thread is intended to be used with fingering weight yarn, or fingering or sock weight yarn. and they say to carry it along with your work as you're working it, and then to go over and do the cross stitching or weaving in, like sewing it on. So obviously I hadn't done that, and because it didn't arrive until after I finished this. So we're gonna see what we can do to make this work, but that's a project for another day. I wanted to show you that anyway. I knit these on 3.25mm needles, which is a US 4. Oh, and I should have told you, I knit this on a 4mm needle, which is a US 6. And then the rest of my finished objects I have to show you is, surprise, surprise, a stack of socks. So yeah, I have a lot of socks to show you guys. We'll go in order that they were knit, or started, I guess. So this first pair of socks is what I'm dubbing my Star Wars socks, or droid socks. And this is all my socks I'm showing you, bar one, and I'll talk about that when I get to it, were knit on 2.25mm needles, US 1s, and either on high sharps or Chiagu needles. Those are the two that I tend to alternate between for my sock projects, depending on what I have at hand. And my socks are all either knit 2 at a time or concurrently. I don't do 1 at a time socks, they're just not my thing. And all my socks I do nowadays have this garter heel. So I have a German short row heel, which is in all of my sock patterns now, and I just prefer knitting it in garter stitch, which all it means is you follow the same instructions for the German short row heel. You just knit every row instead of purling back on the purl side rows. I'm just saying that all now so I don't keep repeating myself throughout these when I show you the socks. So this yarn was by Wild Hair Fiber Studios. I looked down because my laptop's on my lap, the notes, and this is in the, what's it called? Oh, these are the droids you're looking for, is the colorway. And I started these just in time to knit on them when we went to see the new Star Wars film just before Christmas. So that's what I knit on then. And yeah, I really like how these have turned out. I like it. And that's those. So these are knit for me in my size. I've noticed, actually, talking about socks, and I may have knit like a bajillion socks. I actually checked the other day. I've knit in the last 3 years since I started knitting socks. I've knit over 170 pairs of socks. Even so, even having said that, there are still things that I'm learning about sock knitting. So like no one, you never stop learning. And one thing that I've learned the hard way is that since being pregnant, my foot size has changed, and the socks that I knit for myself prior to being pregnant don't really fit me that well anymore. They don't fit properly. They're a bit too small now. So I've slowly been passing them on to my mum because they just don't fit me anymore. They fit her. So so I'm having to knit my socks just a little bit longer, not much. Like we're talking maybe 5 rows extra in the foot, but 5 rows in sock knitting, that's like that could be up to ½ an inch in size difference. Like my foot has grown like considerably since I've been pregnant, and considerably since we moved away from the UK initially anyway. So yeah, I'm having to learn the hard way. I've had to learn the hard way that I need to knit my socks just a tad bit longer for myself, just because my foot has grown. Anyway, so that's that one. The second pair of socks was my Christmas Eve cast on, and I decided to choose a special yarn for myself to knit socks out of, and this yarn couldn't have been more special. It is hand spun by my friend Sarah. It's a bit of a joke because I keep referring to her as my friend Sarah, and she does also do a podcast called the Reluctant Sisters podcast with her sisters, although lately she's been doing it on her own. But yeah, she spins amazing yarn, and I've been fortunate enough to be the recipient of a lot of her hand spun that she's gifted me over the years that we've known each other. And yeah, and so I decided I'd never used her hand spun to knit socks with yet, I don't know why, but I decided to knit myself a very special pair of hand spun socks. And I've never knit myself a pair of hand spun socks before. So yeah, and I really love it. And this is also fibre by Into the World in the radioactive colorway, and she spun this as a, let me get this right, it was a, oh, what do you call it, Is it fractured? Oh geez, I can't remember the terminology now, but it's kind of like, it's a way of doing 3-ply yarn which gives you this bubble polling sort of striping effect. Oh, it's really going to bug me now because I did know it and now I can't remember, and I didn't put it into my notes for some reason. Oh, it's going to bug me. Okay, well if I remember I'll come back to it. But basically this is my standard vanilla sock. I do have 2 vanilla sock recipes. One is free and one is a paid for pattern. The paid for pattern comes with the German short row heel. That's really the main difference, and also the pattern overall has a bit more details on like measuring your foot and circumferences and stuff like that. So that's that. So sorry, the 2 vanilla sock recipes, I think one is called Mina's 2 at a time socks, and the other one is called, the paid for one is Mina's vanilla sock recipe. Is that one. All right, so the next pair of socks is this one. This is, the yarn is by Alstom Step. Jeez, why is that so difficult? Alstom Step, and it was color number, wrote this down so I wouldn't forget, 0219. So Alstom Step is a German sort of commercial sock yarn. It is basically on par with things like Opal and Regia, just to give you a comparison. And that's how this one knit up. I don't think I hadn't intentionally started them to match them. I started one, and then when I started the other I realized I was basically a row, or like half a row out between them. You can see on the cast on it was slightly different. So yeah, I just went with it, and they turned out to match pretty well until the end here. It always seems to be that they always match until the toe for some reason. I don't know what happens at the toe, but anyway. So that will be, this is the first of the gift socks for this year, and this was knit last year. So I say this is the first, it's not true technically. I do have some socks that I knit last year which are going to be gift socks for this year, but they are pattern socks, so either socks from the club for this year's, the 2018 sock club, or from the New York sock collection, which I have set aside to be gift socks for this year. So this year's upcoming Christmas. I start early. For those of you who want to know how I managed to knit as many socks as I did for gift knitting, I start early. I start the year before even. So yeah, I tend to just like, because I knit so many socks, I just stockpile socks for gifts, and then I have a lot to choose from when it comes down to it. And then one of my New Year's Day cast-ons was this pair of socks, and this is yarn by Hip Wool Yarns. Yeah, I think it was Hip Wool Yarns. Yeah, Hip Wool Yarns. It was their sock blank, and it was ice dyed, which I think is a really fun dyeing technique. I've never tried it myself, but you can do it with snow or with ice, and it's just a way of dyeing yarn using snow and ice to like get a really fun like placement of color. I understand it a little bit. I've never done it, so I don't want to go into too much detail and like give out wrong information, but you can Google it or look on YouTube. I'm pretty sure there's some tutorials online I've seen of people doing it, and it's really fun technique. I think it would be really interesting to try. But this was dyed using that technique, and the colorway is Monet's Garden, and I absolutely love this green section. This is possibly my favorite part of the whole thing. But yeah, I will say though, this sock bled like crazy when I washed it, which I wasn't too surprised by, considering how saturated the pink and purple sections are. So there was a lot of pink that came out when I washed it. And I did use a wool wash, and this is going to be a gift sock, so I probably will wash it one more time before I gift it to anybody. And anyone I do gift it to, I will tell them to hand wash this a couple of times until it stops running, before putting it in with their general washing stuff, if they do want to wash it in the machine, just to be safe. Then next up was this pair of socks. This is actually yarn, again, more commercial yarn that I picked up in the UK actually, because it got to about a little over a week before we were coming, well, about 10 days before the end of our trip, and I took enough yarn for 4 pairs of socks and a shawl design project. And it got to about, like I said, a few days before, 10 days before the end of our trip, and I was coming up to the end of this. These were all the socks I took with me to knit in the UK whilst we were in the UK. These 4 yarns, I'd finished these socks and there was still 10 days before the end of our trip, and I was just like, no way this is going to be enough to get me through. Or not 10 days, it was like 6 days. Anyway, about a week left before we had to come back, and I was like, there's no way this pair of socks is only going to take me a week to knit. I mean, it's going to take me more than a week to knit, because everything else I'd been knitting, the socks had been taking like between 3 and 4 days to get through each pair. So I was like, I'm gonna run out of yarn. Quite panicked, to be quite honest, because my shawl design project is a design and it isn't really simple, and it wasn't at a point where I was going to be able to just like pick up and put down, and because it's a design I need to take notes and keep track of things, so it's not the kind of thing I can just do on the go, like in the car, on the plane, with a baby around, stuff like that. It was really, I took it along in case I had downtime to be able to actually sit and do focused knitting, which I had very little of, but I did start it while we were in the UK. But I was like, I was saying to Perry, I was joking with him, I'm gonna run out of yarn. And he was like, what are you gonna do? Like run across the fields like a rabid knitter and like try and like hunt down your own yarn? Because we were at his parents at the time and they live in the countryside, and there is literally a field of sheep across the road from their house. So it was a funny moment. I actually got it on Vlogmas as well, so if you've seen that, you'll remember. But as it happens, in the village near where my in-laws live, there's a little craft shop called Heathfield Crafts. And they also have a selection of yarn. It's mostly acrylic, mostly the sort of like baby yarns, like in the UK, if you're from the UK, you'll be familiar with like brands like Serdar and King Cowl and stuff like that. But they do also carry some sock yarn. So I popped in on our way back up to London really quickly just to see what they had, and I picked up a few skeins, 3 skeins I think it was in the end, of their of some of their sock yarn, and this was one of them. And this was called, it's by Wendy Rome Yarns, in the Moor colorway, MOOR. And yeah, I really liked it because it had this sort of like barber pole effect. It gives the illusion of hand spun. It's obviously not hand spun, it's commercial. It was actually very affordable yarn. I believe it was like £5.99 for £5.99, which is something like $8 for 100 grams. So for a pair of socks, like you really can't go wrong with that. And these will make great gift socks as well. I tend to use commercial yarn for gift socks where possible, just because they're easy to care for. They can be thrown in the machine. I mean, some hand-dyed yarns can be thrown in the machine, depends on the care instructions, but I mean, I personally have no issues with it. I know some people do, but I don't have any issues with machine washing all of my socks. But if I'm gifting socks, I don't want people to feel overly precious about it or being worried about using them and stuff. So yeah, that's how these turned out. I will say one thing though, there was a knot in the skein somewhere around here, and where it rejoined, it must have just been a bit of a repeat of this color section. So I've got a really long orange purple section at this end here, but it's not too bad. I feel overall the socks feel pretty balanced. One has a lot less yellow in it than the other, but it's not too bad. They're obviously a pair, I feel like. They were never going to be completely matchy anyway, but I like how it turned out. So there was that one. And then the last pair of socks I have to talk to you guys about is this one. This is a collaboration that Wool and the Gang did with Regia. And again, if you watch Vlogmas, you'll have seen this package when it arrived. I showed it on a Vlogmas episode. And I love the idea of this. I will just go out and say I love the idea of the kit. I love the idea of the idea behind the whole concept of what they were trying to do. I just feel like, for me anyway, it just didn't work out how I would have wanted or how I was expecting. And I feel like for what it was, it could have been potentially done better. I don't know necessarily how, but I do have an idea for one aspect of it, of how it could have been done better, but I do understand from a patterning perspective that gauge is really important with this one. So I'll start from the beginning. This is supposed to be a leopard print self-patterning yarn. So it prints up with like these leopard spots. So you can see mine haven't worked out quite right. I'll talk more about that in a second. And the colorway that I have is Cool Cat Copper. And I picked this when they contacted me to try it out and be it like do a review on it. So they did send this to me for free in exchange for my honest review, and you are going to get my honest review. They're not paying me to say anything, and you'll probably gather that from the review. Like I said, I love the concept, I love the idea, and I love the yarn. The actual yarn is Regia yarn. It's really good, but it's really good sock yarn, I mean. But you have to get very specific gauge in order to get the spots to work. Now the gauge they tell you in the pattern that you have to get is 7.5 stitches to the inch. I typically knit my socks at a gauge closer to 8 to 9 stitches to the inch, more like 8 to 8.5 seems to be about my average. 7.5 stitches to the inch for a pair of socks for me is quite loose. And looking at this, like, they're wearable, but I feel like that's quite a loose gauge. Now, I got 7.5 stitches to the inch for the majority of this sock, and the patterning still doesn't look particularly leopard spottish. It's a bit skewy. Now, according to the instructions, it tells you that if your spots are skewing a certain way, you need to go up a needle size. If they're skewing the other way, you need to go down a needle size because you're too loose or too tight. So the pattern is very good in telling you how to adjust your needle size based on what gauge you're getting. And they actually do give you you do get 3 sets of DPNs with the kit, so you can adjust for your gauge to get the right gauge. My issue was I was knitting these on US 1.5, which is a 2.5mm needle, and according to the way that my spots were skewing, I would have had to go up a needle size to a US 2, which is a 2.75mm needle, which is even loose, which would have been even looser than this, and this already is, in my opinion, for me anyway, too loose for a pair of socks for myself, or for like anyone I'd want to gift it to. I'd be worried about them wearing through too quickly. And the strange thing was, like, I was measuring this and I was still getting gauge, and I don't understand why it wasn't working. So that aside, I understand that patterning, the gauge is important for the patterning to show up. I just feel like maybe the gauge they should have aimed at should have been something a little bit tighter than 7.5 stitches. It probably should have been closer to 8 stitches per inch. I feel like that's a more standard sock gauge anyway. That at least most of my patterns are written for 8 stitches to the inch for sock patterns, and I feel like that gives a better sock fabric. I don't know. My other issue with it was I can't remember. I looked back when I first received the kit, but I can't remember now how much the kits actually are, and I believe you have like options for how, because I think they've got like 5 different colors that you can have, and you can either get the kit with like 1 color, 3 colors, or 5 colors. I think I can't remember now exactly how it worked, but I feel like the kit is aimed at being it's marketed as being an advanced kit, so they're not aiming for like a newbie knitter to pick this up and start knitting socks with this kit. So I feel like with that in mind, if you're aiming this at more of an advanced knitter, you're probably going to be getting to more of someone who's probably knit socks before, and someone who probably already has sock needles. So I feel like maybe you didn't necessarily need to, I don't know. I understand why they send all the needles with it, because it's meant to be a kit, but at the same time, I feel like even if you had, people probably have their own needles that they would probably use in preference. The other thing I had an issue with is that the ball that you get is only 80 grams of yarn total, which again, not an issue in itself, because I rarely use more than 80 grams for a pair of socks anyway, but it's designed to be knit top down, and it's designed like a skein of Regia Perfect, where you have the leader yarn. I don't have the ball, like the original ball, to show you because I've knitted it up now, but you have like the yellow leader yarn. If you've seen the Regia Perfect yarns before, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so I split mine into 2 so I can knit them 2 at a time. But what happens is you only get that much yarn at the beginning for the ribbing before you then have to start knitting the leg, and that's only 8 rows. That's only 8 rows of ribbing. That is not enough ribbing for me. I typically knit 20 rows of ribbing for my socks, so 8 rows of ribbing right there, that was my first issue with this sock. Then you see how short this leg is? That's how much leg you get before the heel yarn kicks in. And I'm just like, again, that's, for me, from cast on to the start of the heel was 50 rows. My socks typically have anywhere between 80 to 100 rows before I start the heel. So that's a much shorter sock than I ever knit. I typically never knit socks that are shorter in the leg than the foot length, unless I'm knitting a shorty sock, in which case it's just an ankle sock and it's just like sort of starts here. So that was my second issue, was the length of the leg and the cuff. My third issue was the way the instructions were written for the heel. It was very odd. Like, they put in the heel yarn into the patterning sequence essentially, but then they tell you to cut out the heel yarn, ball it up, set it aside, put in waste yarn for an afterthought heel, and then come back and do it later. And I kind of just felt like, why didn't you just put the heel yarn as a separate mini skein that comes with the kit, and to avoid having to cut your yarn? If you're gonna have people do an afterthought heel anyway, why make them why put the heel yarn in there? So I didn't fully understand that idea either, or why they would do that. So I just put in my German short row heel in garter stitch, and then cut the yarn and rejoined after I wound off the extra heel yarn that was left, and then continued with the foot. And then when you get to the end of the foot, you get to the end of the patterning, and then you knit however many extra rows you need to get to the right length before you start your toe decreases. But what I'm left with now is a whole bunch of this grey yarn, which could have been in the cuff. It is what it is, it's fine, and I'll probably use this for heels and toes in another pair of socks at some point. There's plenty of that left, at least for heels anyway. So yeah, I just feel like they probably could have put a bit more yarn into the leg allowance, I guess, section. But like I said, I don't have too much of an issue with the way the patterning turned out. That was just my gauge, and even though I was getting the gauge the pattern called for, it was obviously not working quite right with my tension for some reason. But because I'd gone up a needle size from my usual, I'd actually knit these intending these to be like gift socks for somebody, and but because I'd gone up a needle size, the number of rows that I knit for the leg, for the foot, sorry, has actually ended up meaning now that it should have fit that person, but because I wasn't using my usual needle size, it now fits me. So I now have a short pair of socks that are shorter than I would normally like, but I guess I could still wear them with like trainers or something, but we'll see. We'll see. I might try and I might see if they still fit the recipient well enough that they can still wear them, but we will see how that goes. So I like the idea, I love the concept, but I feel like it could have been executed better maybe, or I just feel like the pattern was more complicated than it needed to be, and yeah, I feel like if you knit your socks typically on US 2.5s or bigger using sock yarn, and you get a gauge that is around 7.5 stitches to the inch, and you're happy with that sort of fabric, then yeah, go for it. Like this will probably work well for you. But I feel like for just the way that I knit my socks and how I like my socks to fit and the kind of density I like in the fabric, this probably wasn't the best for me. Nothing wrong with the yarn, nothing wrong with the actual product itself. It's just, I feel, you know how I feel. I've just been going on about it for the last like 10 minutes or however long it's been. So I'm gonna move on. Those are just my thoughts. Like I said, they sent me the kit to review, and that was my review. That was my opinion. Those are my opinions. I'm not saying they're like the be all and end all. So feel free to make up your own minds about it. But if you wanted to know what I thought, there you go. Whew, that was a lot of talking, and we're only just getting started. We are now moving on to works in progress. I have a few things to show you. I have a variety of project bags here for you, and yeah, I will put them back there again and pick them up one at a time. So mostly what I have to show you are socks and one shawl. And most of these socks are designs for the New York for the 2018 sock club. So this first one, I'm only going to show you the sides that doesn't have the patterning on it, because I don't want to give anything away, obviously, because the actual designs are going to be a surprise. So this lovely green one, green number, I absolutely love this green. This is my green. This is my favorite sort of shade of, so that's sort of like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a golden undertone sort of green. It's beautiful. This is the Narnia colorway by Once Upon a Corgi, and this is her tag. This is on her Isaac base, which is 100% superwash Polworth. Why does it not want to focus? There we go. And yeah, it's on the 100% superwash Polworth. I've never actually knit with Polworth before, so this is really fun. to be working on, and these are being knit on 2.25mm needles, Jagus. So that's those, and these are being knit 2 at a time. And this is this one's for the Wanderlust sock club, just in case you're wondering. Then next up we have this is yarn by Nora George. Just make sure I don't show you the pattern side. You can see the ribbing is slightly different than my usual. This is a 1x1, but it works well with this particular pattern. And this one has a contrasting colour. So the kit, the sock set that she sent me, this is her label, Nora George Yarns. It's in the Phillip Town colourway, which I believe is a custom colour she dyed for me, because she spelled Phillip the way that I spell my surname. It's a 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. There we go, Phillip Town colourway. I don't know if she sells this colourway individually or if it was a one-off dye that she did. And she sent it with a coordinating mini in the green, which I've been using, which I use for the cuffs and will be using for the heels, and if there's enough for the toes as well. There should be enough, but there we go. That's how this one's knitting up so far. I'm a couple of repeats in. I'm knitting this one concurrently also on Jagus, and this is from the Cozy Sock Club. There we go, there's that one. Again, purples and greens are just very much my colours. And then next up, this is a project bag by Maple Moose Fibres. If I don't tell you who the maker of the project bag is, it's probably one that I've made. And if it isn't, then it's just because I've forgotten to tell you. And this yarn is by Lolo Did It. Here we go, the tag. Oh, come on, camera. Lolo Did It. And this is on Lolo's Favourite, which is the MCN base. So it's 80-10-10 superwash merino, cashmere and nylon. And the yellow for the contrasting colour is Fame. And then the main colour, the main yarn is Tin Roof Remix. So she has a colourway, Lauren has a colourway called Tin Roof, and she slightly modified it for me, and so she's called this one Tin Roof Remix. So it's a grey base with some yellows and rusts, and I think there's a bit of green in there as well. Really, really lovely. I love this colour. And again, this is one of my favourite sort of mustardy yellow shades. I really love this shade of yellow. I feel like yellow is very underappreciated in our world. Knitters don't tend to want to knit with yellow. I think a lot of people feel like yellow washes them out. I just feel like you haven't found the right shade of yellow. I really like a golden mustardy yellow. I also like a chartreusey green, but that's more on the green side of yellow. But in terms of wearing next to skin, I think a mustard yellow is really beautiful. At least I feel like that suits me fine. I'm sorry, and that Lolo Did It one is on High Highers, I believe it was. Yeah, High High Sharps. I've actually realised, I was going to mention this, I've actually realised I don't tend to gravitate towards my High High Sharps as much for socks. I still love my interchangeable set, I use that almost exclusively for everything. But I don't tend to gravitate towards it as much for my socks because, I don't know how well you can see that, but they are very bent. I'm trying to show you, like I'm holding these up straight at the moment and they are very bent. I can feel it when I'm knitting with them that they're bent from like how much I've used them. I also feel like these ones in particular aren't that old. I bought these at Vogue Knitting Live last year in 2017, so they're about a year old, and I stopped using them very frequently towards the end of last year anyway. So I don't know, the actual needles have bent from being used, and I do feel like the needles aren't as they are lighter than the Jagus, they are, but the Jagus don't bend, so there's that. And so I've found that I don't pick these ones up as frequently as I pick up my Jagus. If the Jagus are free, then I tend to use those first. It's just, I guess, how my habits have changed, because I guess I must hold the needles quite tightly at some point that it's just bent them. Okay, and then but the last pair of socks I have to show you is probably one of the most recent acquisitions I've had, is some Felici yarn, which if you watched the Vogue Knitting Live vlog, you'll have seen this purchase. And this is in the Sonora Sunset colorway. It's Felici. It is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. It is by Knit Picks. It is a super affordable, super soft, really, really soft sock yarn. I love using Felici for gift socks. I have pretty much gifted every single pair of Felici socks I've ever knit. I don't think I've ever actually kept any for myself. I had actually kept some for myself, but I ended up giving them to my mum because, like I said, my foot's grown and they don't fit me. So there's that. But they're really fun self-striping yarns, and as you can see here, I hadn't intended to do this, but when I pulled the yarns out, I realized where they were both starting, and they're basically exactly half a repeat off from each other. So this repeat starts from the blue going into the pinks and oranges, and this one started with the pinks and oranges going into the blue. So they're going in the same direction, but they've just started at like the halfway mark from each other. So it's a 6-striper. Felici tends to be quite wide stripes. They're about 6-7 rows per stripe. So it's quite a wide stripe. More standard stripe widths, I guess, for hand-dyed self-striping tends to be around 4 to 5 rows per stripe, is what I've seemed to have found to be typical. Not to say that that's everybody, but it's what seems to be the average. So yeah, that's all the socks, and those socks were all cast on in the last like 2 days. The Felici I cast on I started this morning, but the others all started in the last 2 days, just because I find, for me anyway, that actually casting on is the hardest part of getting started with a with socks anyway, because I don't really enjoy the ribbing. I will say that's usually my least favorite part, but especially because I have these designs that I want to work on and get sort of a bit of I've already got a head start on the sock club for this year. The first 6 designs are done, so I'm good until June. I could take a bit of a break from it, but quite frankly, I feel more relaxed once it's all, you know, as soon as, you know, when I get them all done, and then I've got time to photograph them and like edit the patterns and get that all done nicely and not have to stress about it. So I just want to get them all started. They're not all going to necessarily be worked on together at the same time, so I'll probably work on one pattern, and then the vanilla socks, which is the Felici, which will be gift socks. So I'll probably work on those two sort of side by side. When I can and focus on knitting or whatever, I'll knit on the pattern socks. And then if I need vanilla socks from going out for the day, or we're traveling, or something's going on, or I'm looking after Layla. Like today, for example, the Felici socks were great because Layla was having a bath earlier, and you know, she's at a point now where she can sit in the bath and play, and you know, I don't have to like have a hand on her the whole time, so I can knit a couple of rows while she's playing in the bath. And so vanilla socks are great for those occasions. So yeah, that's kind of how it's going to be. And then the pattern socks, because they're started and they've each got like 1 or 2 repeats put on them now, I can you know, when I have time, I can just pick up and work on those as well. And the last work in progress I have to show you is in one of my project bags. I forgot to mention. So the Felici, this is what I mean, I'm really bad at remembering to tell people where bags are from. The Felici is in a bag by Daisy Girl Company. Yeah, Daisy Girl and Company. This bag was sent to me kindly to try out, which is really lovely. I actually really like this bag. It's got the clear vinyl panel in the middle, so you can clearly see your project in there. It needs a bit of a clean. Layla's got grubby hands on it. But yeah, it's covered in cat fur and Layla's hand marks and everything on the plastic, but it's really good. It's really sturdy. I love sturdy project bags. They're great. And I've taken this one out a lot as just a handbag as well, like with the project in it, and then I throw a couple of bits, whatever I need, and take it with me. I also love the other, like the squishier ones, because they can go into my handbag, so I like both types. This is one of my own project bags, and I don't sell project bags anymore, I used to. But this is a design project, and I am using a variety of yarns by Primrose Yarn Company on her Adelaide single space. This is the main colour that I'm using. It is called Charcoal and Glitter, and that is the only one that I remember, because I have a variety of minis in here from Primrose Yarn Company as well. If you watched my Rhinebeck vlog and the haul video segment at the end of it, you will have seen all of these minis. I showed them all off one by one in that video. So if you want to see what they all look like up close, go ahead and check out that video. I'm not going to be showing this design to you up close too much, just because I want to keep it a bit of a secret. It is a really fun sort of, it's going to be a shawl / wrap type style. Oh, just look at all that texture, it's so much fun. I'm so looking forward to getting this blocked and seeing what it looks like when it's finished. I mean, I know what it's going to look like, but I'm just so excited for this one. This is going to be, I had a specific like image in mind, and as always happens with my designs a lot of the time, not always, is as I'm knitting it, I suddenly think of all these different ways that it can be changed and like adapted and modified and customized to like be so many different things. And I absolutely love it, like following the same formula to get the exact same like overall look, but the way you can play with color with this one is going to be so much fun. So I've done it with 2 full skeins of yarn and 10 20-gram minis. So we're talking like 4 full skeins of yarn in total that goes into this. So you could probably mix that up however you want. If you had, you will need 2 full skeins of the main color if you want to do it all, the main color all as one. You could always, I guess, split up that bit and have 2 different colors in the shawl as the main color. But if you had like 2 skeins of the main color, and then you could do 20 10-gram minis instead of 10 20-gram minis, or use 45-gram minis. You could do whatever you want with it, basically. You could use scraps, you could use less contrast colors. You could, instead of having 10 20-gram minis, you could have 5 40-gram minis. You could do whatever you want in that sense. I say 40-gram minis aren't really minis, they're more like leftover scraps. Yeah, it'd be a really fun way to use up some leftovers, to stash bust a bunch of those minis that you've got lying around, use those like mini advent calendars, you know, all sorts of things like that. It would be super fun, I feel like, to play with color a little bit. And I have an idea for the name of that shawl as well, and I think I want to call it the Changes Shawl. Every time I work on it, I keep getting that song by David Bowie in my head, his song called Changes. And yes, I'm kind of mulling that over. So right now it's the working title is Changes. Okay, I'm gonna hurry it along a little bit because I realize I've already got over an hour's worth of footage, and so this is gonna be a long one. In terms of acquisitions, I've got some pins to show you guys. So a lot of these you will have seen from the Vogue Knitting Live vlog if you watched that. I'm not going over my Vogue Knitting Live haul or acquisitions there because I did that as part of the vlog. If you're interested, you can go watch that. So I'm not going to go over all of those pins, but there are 2 on here that I wanted to show you. That's this one, Knit All the Things. Yeah, Knit All the Things. And this one, the sweater, it says Bundle Up. These 2 were very kindly sent to me by the lovely Andy from Andre Sue Knits. I believe you can purchase them from her website, which is andresueknits.com. And she sent these to me over Christmas with a Christmas card. I wasn't here to get them, and so I got them once we got back from London, and I just obviously hadn't podcasted since then. But look how cute these are. Perfect. Absolutely love them. And they go really well with everything else on this bag. Although this bag is starting to look a little bit worse for wear. It is a hand woven fabric which I got in Bahrain, directly from the person who wove them, which was really fun. And then I did sell a few project bags made from these as well, and I kept one for myself. So this has become my project bag for my pins. I never used to be a pin person. I posted about this on Instagram the other day. I was like, I'm not one to follow trends in the knitting world, or any world really. I don't do trends. Not because I have anything against them, quite the contrary. Usually, especially with knitting anyway, I'm just so busy doing my own designs and stuff that I don't really have time to follow trends, as it were, even if I wanted to. In service of like, anyway. So, and enamel pins, when they first became a thing, I was like, what's the point of that? Like, I really didn't understand the big deal of it, or why people were so like attracted to it, or why it became such a thing. So now look at me. I fell down that rabbit hole. But in fairness, like, I hadn't bought an enamel pin until Vogue Knitting Live this last weekend. So all the ones that I'd received, that I had up until now, had been sent to me, either as gifts or as part of like packages or whatever's. I mean, this one I had bought previously, but this isn't an enamel pin, it's just a badge from Iceland. It's a needle felted sheep. I thought it was quite cute. But yeah, so the ones I picked up at Vogue Knitting Live was this one, Knit Yorker, the skein bow, Knit Like a Local, the Moomin unicorn knitting person. It's not actually a Moomin, but it looks like a Moomin. That's from Knit Picks. And Yarn Snob. So Yarn Snob and the skein bow were from Shelley Can, and the Knit Yorker and Knit Like a Local were from One More Row Press. They were in the Backyard Fiberworks booth, and obviously the unicorn knitting was from Knit Picks, as I said. You can get that from the Knit Picks website. They also have a couple of other ones which were quite cute. And again, these two were from Andre Sue Knits. This one is from Lavender Loon Yarn Co. There's also one designed by Shelley Can. This skein and this skein are from Fibre and Brimstone, and this one was part of a Yarn Crush package that I received that I did a review on. So yeah, that's that. I wasn't planning on going over all of them all, but I thought I'd do that since I was doing it anyway. And then in terms of other acquisitions, yesterday I went out and I met up with Ellie from Skein Dear Knits. She was in town for Vogue Knitting Live, and she was staying for an extra few days, and Layla and I were free yesterday, so we went and met up with her yesterday, and we headed to Line Brand Yarn Studios in near Union Square. So we headed over there. Ellie was looking for something specific, and I thought, perfect. I also needed to go to that area to run a couple of errands, and also I've been looking for some sock blockers. Again, I mentioned this in my Vogue video. No one at Vogue Knitting Live was selling sock blockers. I searched everywhere, and I wasn't even being fussy about what kind of sock blockers. I just wanted sock blockers, and no one was selling them. I have these ones, which are a medium size. These are the Spun metal sock blockers, the clear ones. And I actually bought these from Line Brand when I first got them. This was back well before we moved here. Must be like 2 or 3 years ago now. One way around. So yeah, so this is the medium size, and yeah, so I got these, and I actually found that I think Line Brand is the most affordable place that I have seen them being sold for, like in person. I've seen them being sold at Loop in London. They're quite expensive there. I saw them being sold at Knitty City, and I believe Knitty City was selling them for $25 in store, like not at Vogue, but these metal sock blockers for about $25 for the pair. Line Brand sells them for $16 for the pair. I'm not sure if you can order them online from Line Brand, but if you are in New York and you are looking for these, Line Brand's the place to get them in terms of the most affordable option. So yeah, so I picked up, so I was looking for the large, because I knit for the men in my life, and also for myself now. Like I do find that socks that I knit for me are too big on the medium. So you can see the mediums here. It's a little bit wider and a little bit longer in the leg as well. So I definitely need the large for my size, for Perry, for my dad, for my brother, for my father-in-law, for basically any man that I knit for, as well as myself. I need the large. So I've been looking to get these for a while, and like I said, they were $16 from Line Brand. So I don't usually talk about prices of things, but I know I get a lot of questions about these sock blockers, so I wanted to go into as much detail as I can about them. And I like them because they're they're metal, but they're like completely open in the middle, which means like my socks dry super fast. Even in like winter when it's really cold, they don't take that long to dry at all. And I picked up a couple of other little things from Line Brand, again along the lines of gauge and everything. I picked up one of these Ann Bud Knits gauge rulers, which, here we go, Ann Bud Knits. So it's just a gauge ruler, and it's clear, so you can put it over your knitting and line up your stitches with whichever one is accurate, and then it tells you what your gauge is, so you don't have to like faff around with trying to count your stitches too much. So yeah, I've been wanting to get one of these. They're pretty handy to have in your notions case, and so yeah, there's that. And the last thing that I got, again in line with the whole my foot size has changed and figuring out that sometimes some things, I'll get to that in a second, but anyway, so I picked up a sock ruler. This is the sock ruler. the other thing, other than the fact that my foot size has changed, I've noticed as well that depending, and this is an obvious thing and I knew this, but for some reason it didn't quite compute in my head when I was knitting, but depending on what sock yarn you're using, the size or length that you need to, the length you need to knit for a sock for someone's foot will stay the same, but the number of rows might be different. Now I knit my socks based on row numbers and I count my rows, but I've realized that sometimes that doesn't necessarily work out great. And case in point, I knit a pair of socks for Perry for Christmas, the Mystic Topaz socks yarn by Turtle Pearl, and it's the first time I've knit a pair of socks for Perry out of yarn that fine. Now Turtle Pearl yarn is quite fine sock yarn. It's 460 plus yards, I think, per 100 grams, which is quite a thin fingering weight yarn. Typical, you know, fingering weight yarn can come in anything from 400 yards to the skein to 460 plus yards per skein. So that's quite a variation in, you know, per 100 grams. So when I knit him socks that are, you know, there's like 400 yards to the skein, I know that 70 to 75 rows is enough for the foot for him. But I did the same with the thinner sock yarn, and the foot is slightly short on him. So I mean, he still wears them, he loves them, he's not complaining. He actually prefers the thinner sock yarn, so he said in future if I could knit his socks with the finer sock yarn, he would prefer that because it fits better in his shoes, I guess, for work. So I thought I would get a sock ruler. That way I could actually mark the length measurements, and then when I'm knitting his socks, I can, you know, I can just do a double check on the length and making sure that they are the right length, you know, so I'm not solely relying on row numbers as well. So you learn something new every day. I'm constantly learning things, and you know, even though a lot of people say that, you know, I don't like saying this, but a lot of people say that like I'm an expert in knitting socks. I really don't feel like I am. You know, I don't think anyone's ever really an expert in anything unless they've done it for like a bajillion years, and I really haven't. I've only been knitting socks for 3 years. I've only been knitting for coming up to 4 years. Like I haven't been knitting that long really in the grand scheme of things. And you know, I still make mistakes and I still learn from them, and I'm still making changes and adjusting as I go. So tools to help with those. Okay, that's it for acquisitions, and now we're going to move on to knit along and giveaway news. Alright, so for knit along and giveaway news, we have the Knitting Expat Designs year-long knit along, which is going to end at the end of January. I started it at the beginning of February last year, so it's a full year. And then we also had the sock club, the New York City sock club, which ended at the end of, the last pattern was released in September. Everything, the grand prize thread and everything was supposed to end at the end of December, or end of November. Then it changed. Sorry, it was supposed to be end of December, then I changed it to end of November, and then it all got a bit muddled up, and I never got around to doing prizes because life got crazy. We were moving, we were coming back to the UK for Christmas, so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to extend it until the end of January and give people like extra time to submit their finished projects. And so it's going to run until the end of January, and then I'm going to close all the threads. Everything's going to close, and then I will draw prizes. And I really quickly just wanted to run over those prizes for those knit alongs with you. So for the sock club, the New York City sock club, that is, not the current one, the New York City sock club, there are going to be 2 grand prizes, and I have shown these in the past. I'm not going to take these out and show you individually, but I'm just going to hold these up. There'll be 2 prize packages with each is going to have 3 skeins of yarn. There is a variety. Both have 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn. One will be a sock yarn, and one is another type of like more appropriate for shawls or something else. And both will have a skein of, I think it's Aran weight. Aran weight yarn as well. This orangey one and this tea leaf blue green one. And then both will have a project bag or tote bag of some kind and some notions. And one has like soap in it, one has like little snips. So it's a fun little bundle of goodies, yarny goodies for you guys. So those are going to be 2 grand prize winners from the grand prize thread. The rules and everything for how you enter in the grand prize thread are in the thread in the very first post. So if you want to know more about that, check that out. And then for the monthly FO thread, I'm going to draw 2 more prizes from that, and then with 2 little fun bundles with sock yarn. and project bag and notions pouch set by me. I don't sell these anymore, so these are some that I've stored and stashed to give away for prizes, so you can't get these anywhere else right now. And then the other one's also a skein of sock yarn and another project bag and notions pouch set by me. So these are 2 prizes for that. So if you haven't entered already, make sure you go ahead and enter your finished objects from the New York Sock Club into there. Then for the Knitting Expat year-long designs, I have 3 prizes lined up for the end of this knit along. And first up are these 2 skeins. These are going to be bundled together. These 2 skeins of, this is Turkish yarn, it's Güzen yarns, I think, and they are both, oh sorry, this one is 50-50 silk and merino, and this one is 75-25 silk, merino and silk. Both are 100 grams, and this one's 380 meters and this one's 350 meters. So it's hand dyed in Turkey. Really beautiful merino silk blends. Either they would look lovely together in a shawl or separately. I'd say this is on the plumper side of fingering weight yarn. So the measure is in meters, so these are around 400 yards-ish range each, so that's 1 prize. The next 2 prizes are actually yarns from Knit Crates, which I do, or I have been doing monthly Knit Crate reviews, and a lot of the times I save the yarn and I use them, I give them away, I use them as prizes on the podcast. So I do the reviews for you guys, and then a lot of the time I give away the yarn as well. So these next 2 bundles are yarns from Knit Crate boxes. So first one is by Lorna's Laces, and this is 2 skeins of their Haymarket base, which is 100% BFL. It is a single ply yarn, 215 yards per 100 grams. So you get 2 skeins of that in their lookbook colorway. So that would be 1 prize. And then the 3rd prize is this one. This is Uru yarn by Knit Crate, and it is actually a self-striping sport weight yarn. It is 70% superwash merino, 10% silk and 20% nylon, 389 yards per 115 grams, and the colorway is called Ice Cream. And I believe this was intended to stripe kind of like for a shawl, so this would be really fun if you were doing basically a shawl, like a really simple sort of shawl to get the most effect out of the striping aspect of the yarn. So that'd be another prize for that. I do actually have 2 more Knit Crate packages to do a review for, but I'm not sure I'm gonna have time to record the review tonight. I'll probably do that tomorrow. But so keep an eye out. I will have a couple of another review video coming up soon for Knit Crate. And then the last set of prizes that I have to show you is for the current sock knit along. So we currently have the Wanderlust Sock Club. The first pattern has been released. So at the end of each month, I will be doing prize drawers. Sorry. Was it at the end of each month, or was it going to be the end of every 2 months? I can't remember now. There's going to be at the end of every 2 months. Yeah, because... Alright, so the way the sock club works, if you're not familiar, is for the Wanderlust Sock Club, the patterns are released every other month. January, March, May, like every other month that way. And then for the Cozy Sock Club, it's every other month. So it'll be February, April, June, like that, going on throughout the year. So for each club, you get 2 months to complete the socks before the next pattern is released. So what I'm going to do is, so for the January club, for the January pattern, the rest of the socks, which I showed you at the beginning, people in the Wanderlust Sock Club are going to have until the end of February before the next pattern comes out. So at the end of February, I will draw prizes for from that finished object thread for the Wanderlust Sock Club. I hope that made sense. And the prizes for that I've picked out is going to be a skein of fully spun yarn in the Voices in My Head colorway, which is the same yarn, not the same base, but the same yarn that I used to knit the sample out of. And this is the 2-ply BFL fingering weight. It is 350 yards in 3.5 ounces, so it is a super plump fingering weight yarn, along with a needle cozy and progress a stitch marker from Whimsy Stitches. A really fun rainbow needle cozy or DPN cozy. There we go. So there's that's 1 prize. And then the second prize is going to be, it's another project bag by Whimsy Stitches, and This is one that Rick gave to me over Christmas. He said I could either keep it or use it for a giveaway, and I feel like it actually goes really well with this prize package. And it's not just Christmassy, it's a bunch of presents on it, so I figure this is good any time of the year. And it will go with this lovely skein of sparkly blue yarn. I believe the dye behind this was someone called Crafty Cassie. She was planning on setting up an Etsy store. I don't know if she ever did. She never got in touch with me to let me know that she had, and there was no tag on the yarn. I just know that it is a sparkly yarn. I think it was a sock blend, if I'm not mistaken, but with a lot of stellina in it. It's very sparkly. You can see that on camera. But yeah, so that'll be the second prize for that one. So those are all the prizes. Ta-da, done. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the questions and answers. And like I said, I am so sorry it has taken me this long to answer some of these questions. I know it's been well overdue, and I'm going to try and get through this pretty quickly. Okay, so Sky Blue Sevens asked, hi Mina, I love watching the podcast each week and get inspired by many of your projects. Thank you. My question isn't knitting related, but kitty related. You've said a few times that you'll be moving and have moved in the past. I wondered where in your travels Derek and Hugo came into your family, and how many places have they lived? I love seeing them on the podcast and vlog. Thanks. Okay, so Hugo and Derek actually came into our lives once we moved to Dubai. Perry and I, my husband, we moved to the Middle East from the UK back in October 2011 is when we left the UK. Yeah, so, and the boys came into our lives the following February. So February 2012 is when we got the boys. And they are now 6 years old. They have been with us their whole lives. We've had them since they were 3 months old. And they've lived with us in Dubai when we lived on the 20th floor. And then they moved with us to Bahrain, where we lived in a villa, or a house, I guess. And then they moved with us to New York. And so they've been with us basically wherever we've been. And the only place they haven't been to is London. So yeah, that's when they came into our lives, and that's how long we've had them. So B-Ball Mum has asked, I recently found your podcast, this is from like back in October. I'm really sorry it's taken me so long. I'm saying she's really enjoying it, so thank you. Her question is, when I have a decent amount of yarn left over from a project, should I reskein the yarn or can I leave it in the cake? Frankly, I don't bother rescaining my yarn. I know, like, theoretically you should, and I understand the theory why you should, but more often than not I tend to pull my yarn from the center of the cake when I'm knitting anyway. So by the time I'm done, the cake is quite floppy and the yarn is relatively relaxed. So I just leave it, personally. If you're worried about it, go ahead and reskein it. But I've never had anything bad happen because I didn't reskein my yarn. I know some people who religiously do it and like they are like adamant that it must be done. Some people like me don't mind, and it doesn't bother me. I feel like there's a lot more, there are a lot of other things in my life that are that need my time more than rescaling leftover yarn. That's just my 2 cents. I don't mind. You do you, I guess. If it's something that bothers you, then do it. If not, I don't see any reason why you can't just leave it. Like I said, I've never had yarn go bad because I didn't reskein it. So that's that. And then Franny Marie on Ravelry asked, I'm knitting my socks on 2.25mm DPNs. I would love to knit more socks, but I'm quite slow, much slower than with knitting shawls or sweaters. I would love to try 2 at a time socks. I know you like the high and Chagrin needles. Would you recommend one of them to a beginner magic loop knitter? And would you buy 2.25 for magic loop too? Or is my gauge likely to be different on a circular sock needle? I'm not sure if your gauge is going to be different. I think that's very much dependent on you as a knitter. I've never knit socks on DPNs. I've not knit much on DPNs ever really, so I can't really speak for how your gauge could potentially change. Personally, I don't think it will change that much, if at all. So I would stick with your regular sock knitting needle size, which is your 2.25s. As to which I would recommend, I like both high sharps and chiagus, and whether or not you go for the sharps or regular steels with high-highs is totally up to you in terms of how sharp of a point you would like and your knitting style. I know some people don't like using the sharps because of the way they knit. They poke holes in their fingers. I don't poke the tips of my needles with my fingers very often, so that's not an issue for me, and I like the sharp points. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, you'll have remembered that at the moment I'm gravitating more towards my chagus. My high highs have bent quite a bit, but also some people don't like the chagus because they feel the cord is too stiff. I like the cord, I really like it. I love that it has no memory and that it's like bounces back easily. It's my favorite aspect, my favorite part of chagus, but I know some people hate that for their socks. So there again, it comes down to personal preference. I think initially I would say go with the high highs because you don't have that cord issue that you get with the chagus that some people find very annoying. So if you feel like that might be something that would annoy you, I would say stay away from it. Otherwise, give it a go. I like both. I think both are equally good. They both have their good points and both have some negative aspects to them. I don't think anything is perfect, but I don't think you could go wrong with either, to be honest. I think just pick one and give it a go, and that's really the best place to start. Then then I am a knitting ninja. Asked is another sort of more personal question, is I was just curious how you and Perry met and what your love story is, if you'd like to share. Okay, I'm going to try and do a really quick version of this just because this podcast is already very long. But Perry and I met at university actually. He was in the year above me academically. We were both doing the same course, and we both actually volunteered when I was in my second year. We both volunteered to be representatives of our course on our university's open day. So basically we would go in on the weekend and we were getting paid by the university to be there to basically chat to prospective students who were coming in, who wanted to speak to existing students to see what the course was like and, you know, what the life was like at this university, and like basically get a student's perspective of the course. And so we'd volunteered to do that. And yeah, so as it turned out, the day that we were working, I guess, very few students came in for our specific course. So Perry and I did a course called Quantity Surveying, and in our school we had the School of Surveying, so they had like 4 or 5 different courses under the surveying sort of like school, I guess, or division in the university. And as it happened, not many people came in for our specific subsection of that course, and I think we had like 2 students come in all day to like speak to us specifically. So we spent the whole day just chatting, drinking tea and eating biscuits, which everyone I tell that to is like, that's a very British thing to do. And yes, it kind of is, I guess. So we just like drank tea and ate biscuits and just chatted. At the time, both of us were in other relationships, so it wasn't a thing at the time at all. It wasn't anything like that. But yeah, so we just got on. We were friends after that for a while, and we stayed in touch. And then a couple of years later, when I was coming towards the end of my time at university, Perry had already graduated. We were both single at the time, and then I can't remember, it was actually over Facebook. He ended up asking me out, and I said yes, and we went out on our first date after I finished my last exams. And like they say, the rest is history. We've been together ever since. So since summer 2009. And that's our story, I guess, in short. It's a longer version, but that's the short version. Okay, I didn't realize quite how many questions there were left to answer. There's still quite a lot left to do. So I'm going to answer the rest of those in next week's vlog and move on to the last section because my battery light is flashing. That's how long I've been talking for. So really quickly going to do a week in review for you guys. I'm not going to go over all the stuff over Christmas because there was Vlogmas for that. Like I said, a bajillion times, go watch that if you're interested. Vogue Knitting Live was last weekend. There is a vlog for that as well, so you can check that out if you want to hear how that went. Layla's going to be 11 months old on Monday, and I honestly do not know where the time has gone. It is mental how crazy, like this last couple of weeks, I swear, like she's not a baby anymore. She's more of a toddler than a baby. And she's just so grown up now. Like her hair is like starting to get curly. Like I can't even, like, just where's my baby? Where'd my baby go? Come back. I'm not ready for this. She's almost walking. She's not quite there yet, but she's going to be walking soon. I know it, and it's just going to be a whole other little kettle of fish. She loves playing with yarn. Yarn is like her favorite thing right now. She's having a difficult time, or like she's getting a bit fussy in the late afternoons and stuff, and like I just open up one of my boxes of yarn and I just let her like throw skeins around, and she has a whale of a time, and it like gives me 5 minutes apiece, so I'm happy with that. In other news, Perry is finally finally agreed to let me knit him a cabled pullover, which I'm so excited about. I've picked out the Navigate pullover from Rib magazine, Rib 2, issue 2. I've got his approval. He just has to pick his yarn now. Over Christmas, we went shopping for him for some clothes, and I encouraged him to purchase a couple of cabled pullovers and cardigans because he needed them for work and stuff. And even though he'd agreed to let me knit him some, I'm not going to get around to knitting. I'm not going to get around to knitting them for a while at least anyway. So so yeah, I figured he may as well get those now. So camera battery died. I've just charged it really quickly to end this. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, this next week I'm going to do a vlog. I'll probably take tomorrow off and then start on Friday and vlog for the next week. I'm not sure what the next week is going to entail for us. There might be a very, very small chance that we'll be back in the UK by the end of next week. It just depends on how things go. Right now it's all a bit up in the air. But yeah, thank you for joining me today. Like I said, I don't even remember where the camera cut me off earlier, but whatever I didn't get to in this week's podcast, in the questions and stuff, I will cover it. I will sit down one day next week and answer the rest of the questions on the vlog. I might even post it as a separate video, I don't know. And yeah, like I said, I have the Knit Crate reviews to do, and I also have the review of Woods, which is by Making Stories, to do, which is so far overdue. I meant to do that last year. It's just been absolutely crazy. But yeah, thank you so much again for joining me today. Sorry, this is going to be a super long video. I'm really apologetic about that. I will try and include timestamps or something if I remember to do that, so you can skip sections if you are not interested. And what else was I going to say? I think that's about it really. We had a really lovely week. It was pretty low-key. Layla, as of like end of last week, was back on track in terms of her schedule and stuff. Like, she's sleeping 11 to 12 hours every night now, which is lovely. Very much appreciated. Thankfully, like, it wasn't as bad getting over the jet lag as I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be a lot harder than it was. It took less than a week. So I'm pretty chuffed with that. And yeah, anyway, I think that's about it. I will chat to you guys later. Bye.